All right, here is a quick meet recap for my athlete Aiden Vandekop, right? He just competed here on February 22nd at the White Lights Open meet here in Allen, Texas. Overall, I think everything went extremely well. I think that prep and then everything we did went to perfectly to a T. We had everything planned out, everything was super predictable. But with the prep itself, we can go into some more detail. Here is a quick little snippet of what things we did throughout prep. So essentially, at the end of the day, all three of his lifts were super successful and super predictable throughout the whole prep. But within the three, I think, in my opinion, the squat was the most finicky, right? So with that being said, there's going to be a lot of things that technically that we had to clean up and then make better prior to the meet day. So a few of those technical aspects were that occasionally Aiden would hip shift in the hole really badly. A lot of the times he would not descend super even. He would descend and then bias towards his left side or right side. So what we'd have to do, what ultimately fixed that was more control in the descent, which came from the addition of pause squats, right? We had pause squats prior, but that was more for strength gains. And then now we had the purpose of the pause squat in order to create a more controlled descent into the hole. So when we do get to the hole, we're a little more symmetric, and then things kind of even out as the whole throughout the whole execution of the lift. But programming wise, there wasn't much that we had to change prior to this prep and then the prep prior. We competed in a pretty quick turnaround. His last meet was November 2nd and now February 2nd. I'd say that's about 2 to 3 months, which is pretty huge for a 45 kilo total PR. But with that being said, we also went up a weight class. We were previously 82 and a half, and then now we moved up to 90. But still, he managed to hit a colossal total PR and then a huge dots PR as well. I think we went from around 402 to 403 to like 414. So despite going up a weight class, the dots improved. That just tells me the strength and everything we're doing is working. But with a programming standpoint, what we used to do, we used to have like a quote unquote higher intensity top set on each of the days, especially the primary days, and then all of our back down work was super sub maximal, not surpassing RP6, usually hovering around the RP3 to 6 range, depending on what week it is. But with that being said, with the feedback Aiden gave me, we had to essentially put more exposure onto there, put more exposure to heavier loads on his body because he would come in telling me that more oftentimes than not, let me adjust this. More oftentimes than not, he would come into the primary day feeling, okay, hey, this weight feels heavy on my back, but it feels super good on my legs. So that tells me that he needed a little bit more intensity exposure on a secondary day, which is exactly what we did. Coming into the program here, we have a primary primary squat Monday, and then our secondary squat is on Thursday. What we have here is a quote unquote heavier top set with a higher intensity workload there. What we used to have, we would just have essentially a pause squats, just 2 or 3 sets of straight sets, one little bit higher intensity pause squat, and then 2 or 3 back downs of straight sets of pause squats, which the purpose was to limit load on the back and not get over fatigued. But as time went on, we knew that we needed to have a little bit more load on the bar. So what I did was change the top set from a pause squat to a comp squat to allow him to load a little bit more weight on the bar and give him that exposure that's needed. So we'll see here that we go from RP 5.5 on week 1 up to RP 7.5 on this week 2 or week 4. Sorry. A lot of times, what we used to do as well, I would put load ranges in for these secondary days. But because strength grew so exponentially, it was a little bit more unpredictable. This was one of the first blocks that I didn't have a load range. I do plan to go back to that now that things have mellowed out. Things are becoming a lot more predictable. But I think the load ranges are super important on that end because he is able to come into the session knowing what he may or may not want to hit without quote unquote undershooting or overshooting, and then that'll also help me create a good baseline for the secondary days or even the primary days. I am a big fan of having the load ranges here, but with that being said, there are other things that we did for squat as well, like had a little bit more intensity for the accessories, right? So we'll go here. We ended up having to put a hack squat here on the second year day to give him even more intensity and more exposure than he than he already had. Previously, it was, I believe, a leg press, so that wasn't loading the back necessarily. So the legs were getting stronger, but the body was not getting used to the heavier load on the back. But going into that, meet day was phenomenal. So we'll see this lift here. This is a 10 kilo all time PR and a 15 kilo meet PR, moving extremely well. So we resulted having the high end on the day for the squats. Going into his meet prep and his attempt selection, we'll pull it up here. Here is the attempt selection we had for Aiden going into the day. Our opener was 195, absolutely flew, as we know. And then it moved so fast, we ended up taking the top end for the second attempt, which was 210. And then this ultimately we ended up taking the top end for the squat as well. In all three lifts, we ended up taking top end. We were able to maximize total on the day despite having I wouldn't say perfect circumstances outside the gym. We were managing to come in strong and then make everything as strong as possible. As for bench, I think bench is Aiden's quote unquote bread and butter. His bench, when we started, has been always the strongest lift in comparison to his body weight of the three. Not saying the other lifts are weak, he is extremely strong, right? But what we were doing technique wise to prior to the this meet prep, we would have the same thing. We would sink the bar for technique. We would let the bar sink into our chest and then kind of heave it upwards. This resulted in less consistent leg drive. The leg drive wasn't as strong. There wasn't constant leg drive like there is now. So what we ended up doing is switching to a little bit softer of a touch. It isn't a perfectly soft touch bench, but we found a slight balance of what feels comfortable for strong. So we were able to create a lot stronger of a constant leg drive as the bar descends, and we could reach our ribs a little bit more towards the bar, and then that created a significantly poppier bar off the chest, and that obviously in turn creates a smoother and stronger bench. But with that being said, the programming aspect was kind of all three when we needed to add more stimulus on the secondary and tertiary days or preceding days going into the primary day. Because strength grew so exponentially, we had to increase the stimulus on all three lifts. So you see that's a trend on this prep, and then it kind of worked out exactly how we wanted to. But we can go into his bench attempts really quickly. We had our opener at 145 kilos, which is about 320 pounds. And then for these, we ended up going the planned attempt here on the second attempt, which is 152 and a half. Not because the opener didn't move well, it's just because the weight felt a little bit heavy in his hands. He said it's moved extremely fast, so I just wanted to play it on the safe side if we wanted to see whether we were going to take this planned here or the good top end here. With that being said, though, his current PR was 345 pounds. So if we took the plan, and we would have PR'd the all-time PR by 2 pounds anyway. But with that, seeing this way the second attempt moved, he said weight felt extremely light, weight felt extremely good, and it moved honestly better than the first attempt. Wish I had a video for it. But going into that, we ended up taking this third attempt at 160 kilos, like you'll see here. Let's pull it up. So you see here, I think this was a really good call for a third. I think this was probably the top end for the day, the strongest bench, the highest bench he would have had. But you'll see here that he kind of slightly reverted to the sink, and then we lost a little bit of leg drive, which also caused a little bit of a variance in the bench. Which, when we work on things as we go on this next few blocks, we are going to clean that up, especially towards top end loads. But like I said, the switch to this quote unquote softer touch has been helping tremendously. We just need to get the technique and muscle memory down. As for deadlifts, like I said with bench and squat, we just wanted to increase intensity and workload on that. But from a technique standpoint, Aiden has a really strong a strong deadlift. But the technical aspect, the biggest issue we wanted to attack throughout these past few blocks were starting position. A lot of times, the hinge to the bar, especially for a conventional lifter, he would have overflexion of the lumbar spine, and then that would create a little bit less of an ideal sparring position. So we created a little bit stronger of a hinge position, and then we had the bar practicing keeping it over the midfoot. A lot of times he would have it set over the forefoot or honestly closer to the toes. So whenever he did wedge, that would result in the hips dropping a little bit too low, having the bar struggle to come off the ground, and then make things move slow until the bar was off the ground. And then that kind of happened as well here on the attempts, but the third attempt he cleaned it up significantly. But let's look at the programming really quick. Um, this is how I had it here. But with that being said, this is the kind of programming we had. I had him do a 3 count descent tempo barbell RDL, and then I had him do 2 or 3 sets of deadlift. For the week one, I pulled back the intensity a little bit. We have him doing 3 sets in general, pushing the RPE a little bit higher. Like I said with squat, I want to be able to push the top end low a little bit. I wasn't able to put a load range because things were being a little bit unpredictable in a positive aspect because getting so strong. But like I said, now I'm going to go back into those load ranges. But we have a 2 count pause deadlifts for a triple. A lot of people don't need a 2 count pause deadlift. The reason why it's a 2 count pause deadlift here is because Aiden would tend to rush the quote unquote pause deadlift. It honestly wouldn't be paused very often. So rather than just forcing him and telling him over and over and over again to make sure to pause it, which ultimately didn't work, I just programmed a 2 count pause deadlift, which ultimately looks like a normal pause deadlift. It's kind of overcueing, over programming, but it's very situational for certain people. I think this worked tremendously. But with that being said, this worked extremely wonders. Like the pause deadlift created a better starting position, a better this like execution of the deadlift. Sometimes he would rush the lift. What I mean by that is he would get the bar off the ground and then immediately lock his knees out and then have his hips lag behind, and then the lockout will struggle sometimes. So with the pause deadlift, he was able to stay over the midfoot a little bit more, have that center mass balanced, and then execute the lift extremely well. But we'll see here with his deadlift, which is also an all-time PR. I'll go into here in a second. It moved honestly significantly better. Yeah, we'll see. Let's watch that over again. We'll see here that moved better than what I expected. Honestly, that was the top end load for the day. So you see here that that was the top end because his prior best was 550 pounds. A lot of people don't taper that well into lifting such heavy weight on meet day, but this was an exception for the case, right? With deadlift, with the opener, honestly, deadlift moved phenomenal throughout the whole day. I think the opener moved extremely well. I took a pretty large jump, 17.5 kilos to the good or the high end for the seconds, because I kind of knew after the opener what he had for the day. I wanted to set him up pretty well. But with the way the second attempt moved, I was kind of confident in loading 265 to 262 and a half, but I wanted to stick to the plan, stay here, and it kind of resulted in a perfect day with a 9 for 9 day, a 45 kilo total PR, a around 10 to 12 dots PR, and then everything moved extremely well. So, yeah.